resuming debate. Are you pleased to debate? The Honourable Member for Vancouver Kingsway.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to stand and speak on behalf of the New Democratic Party on Bill C-39. I think after listening carefully to debates from all sides of the House, it is my desire at this point to express something that I hope will have a little bit of a unifying effect on this debate. And that is this. I believe that every member of this House wants to have safe communities. I believe that every member of this House cares about victims. And I actually believe that every member of this House advocates policies that they really believe will result in safer communities, better respect for victims, and what we all hope to achieve, which is a reduction in the crime rate in this country. Where I think, of course, we differ, and I think debates should be marked by respect and care as we listen to each other, is in the various approaches and philosophies that may be advanced to achieve those ends. Now, speaking on behalf of the New Democrats, we believe in an approach that we characterize as being smart on crime to attain those ends. I can't emphasize enough that the New Democrats, we believe in protecting victims. In fact, as I've said in this House before, and I will say again and again and again, that our party, I believe, has been one with the strongest record of protecting victims in this country. We have always been a party that speaks out for the most marginalized in this society, the poor, the disabled, people whose voices are often not heard in debates, those that don't have access to power. And I would also point out that it is a very well-known fact in sociology and among people who are familiar with the issue of crime, that crime most often is committed by and against those very groups. Most victims of crime are actually found in the most marginalized sectors of our society, the poor, etc. Now, the New Democrats have always brought those voices to the House of Commons. We've always insisted that their interests be taken into account when we discuss any issue. So therefore, I am proud to say that the New Democrats can be said to be one of the strongest voices in the House for standing up for the rights of victims of all types. I want to talk briefly about women, because women are often the victims of crime. Now, our party has got a policy commitment to advancing the equality rights of women that is second to none in this House. So when we talk about advancing the interests of victims and bringing their voice to any debate that touches on their interests, once again, the New Democrats have a record that I believe is something to be proud of. Now, I think that I can also say that the New Democrats believe fundamentally that the best way to keep our community safe is to take whatever measures are effective and that work to make sure that offenders do not reoffend. Now, that seems like a simple concept, but it's absolutely profound in its application. When someone breaks the law and they're sent to jail, the number one goal ought to be to do what we need to do to make sure that while that person is in custody, that person, when they come out, does not go back and re-victimize someone else. Now, this is where I think philosophy comes into play. There are those on the government side of the House that believe that the way to accomplish that goal is to increase the severity and duration of the punishment that those people experience. That's what they say. We need to build more prisons. We need to lock more people up for longer periods of time. And they claim that if we do that, if Canada invests billions of dollars in that policy approach, then we will have safer communities. Now, I respectfully disagree with that. And I don't disagree with it because of ideology. I disagree with that because of fact. Earlier today, I asked one of my colleagues on the Public Safety Committee, the member from Edmonton St. Albert, to name me 2 jurisdictions in the world where the policy approaches that this government is taking towards crime, locking more people up in harsher conditions for longer periods of time, has resulted in lower crime rates. What was his answer? He refused to answer. Could not name one place.
Not a one.
on earth. Now, you would think that this government, with all the resources of government, its ability to do research, it has at its disposal the entire civil service, it has a Department of Public Safety, a Department of Justice, that they could go out and do that research. They could provide this House with the kind of information that we need that would support these policies. But not one state, not one government, not one country, not one province can they name where these policies have been put into place has actually resulted in safer communities. Now, I don't call that an ideological attack. I call that a fact-based one. I'm legitimately curious. We're not the only society on earth that is grappling with crime. Every society is. We have across this world every kind of approach to crime you can imagine. There are more liberal approaches, more conservative approaches. There are tougher approaches, more lenient approaches. We have the approaches of Northern European countries that focus more on rehabilitation. We have approaches of Southern European countries and Eastern countries and countries all over this world, Asian countries that have very, very strong approaches to crime with very tough prison conditions. So what are the results? Why can't this government tell us which model it emulates? Why can't it tell us which country or state it uses as a model that adopts these policies that result in safer communities? The fact that they cannot mention one causes me great concern, simply as a parliamentarian. Now, this bill does have some interesting measures that I think are worthy of some discussion. Of course, I also think, though, that it is fundamentally flawed because it's profoundly philosophically and policy-wise, it is simply mistaken. This bill takes the absolute wrong approach to correctional policy. It does not promote public safety. It runs counter to reducing reoffending behavior. It opens the door to violation of human rights. It runs counter to several Supreme Court of Canada decisions on the rights of people as they're treated by the justice system. It adopts a U.S.-style approach to prisons that is regressive, expensive, and ineffective. Now, I want to mention, in a timely and topical piece that ran today, the head of Corrections Services Canada, Don Head, today announced that they estimate that they will have to spend $2 billion over the next 3 years because of this government's approach to crime. They will have to lock up an additional 4,500 Canadians. Now, right now, to give you put this in perspective, we have approximately 13,500 offenders in the federal corrections system. So this would add another 4,500 people to that, approximately 30% more people in the next 36 months. They have to hire, Mr. Head said, thousands of more staff. They will have to spend much more money on programming. And they will have to double bunk prisoners because they simply don't have the space to house the amount of people this government wants to lock up for the next 3 years, in violation, I might add, of international conventions that Canada is signatory to, saying that we would not double bunk prisoners in cells overnight. Now, that estimate, by the way, that $2 billion, is lower than what the Parliamentary Budget Officer estimated, but I would point out that it's higher than the figures that the Minister of Public Safety has actually indicated so far. So, before we spend billions of dollars, I think that Canadians ought very legitimately to ask, is this a good approach? Does this work? Now, I think a good analogy that all Canadians can relate to is how we treat our children. Now, the approach is, if your children misbehaves, if your child breaks a rule, what's the proper approach to dealing with that situation? Now, this government has a one-sided approach that says punish that child. Just punish them. Now, that will work. That will work for certain children in certain circumstances. I grant them. I think punishment is one aspect of our corrections toolbox that simply has to be there. Where I think the government, with respect, is misguided is that it's not the only tool. And it's not the tool that should be used predominantly. What happens if your child is dyslexic and your child misbehaves in school, not because they're a bad child, but because they're actually masking the fact that they can't actually read. What happens if your child has got FASD, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, and their fidgeting and their inability to follow rules is not because they're a bad person, but because they suffer from a brain damage? What happens if a child has got low cognition, has got low IQ? Well, these are the kind of people that are in our federal institutions. And I say with no hubris whatsoever, I have done something that I dare say 90% of people in this chamber have not done. And that is I have visited over 24 prisons in this country. And I have to tell you, I was surprised when I walked into my first federal institution almost 2 years ago. I had never been in a federal prison before. And what I found was that, in terms of the population, there is no monolithic population. Our prisons are not filled with 100% bad, scary, evil people. There are